Chocolate. Who doesn't love chocolate? We can see chocolate in every drinks and desserts as a proof of our undying addiction for it. Cocoa. Without cocoa, there's no chocolate. The cocoa and chocolate market is actually a billionaire industry which is hugely participated by monster companies such as the well-known Cadbury. But how about in Malaysia? Cocoa was actually a big deal in Malaysia back in the 1990s until palm oil received a huge surge from the transition of people from cocoa to palm. So what exactly happened? How did cocoa become insignificant when the peak moment back then was? So let's talk about this issue. But first, let me introduce our team members. Let's start with the introduction.
Assalamualaikum and hi, I am Nur Sarah binti Rozaidi. Now I am going to present about the introduction of cocoa industry. The cocoa industry contributed 1.64 billion to the GDP, which is gross domestic product in 2020. Gross domestic product is a monetary measure of the market value of all the final goods and services produced in a specific time period by countries. Malaysia is actually one of the largest cocoa bean processing and grinding center, ranked 6th in the world. Our cocoa-based products grown rapidly in the global market and have extensive market coverage to more than 100 destinations worldwide. The export revenue from cocoa and cocoa-based products amounted 6.29 billion in 2020. In the first half of 2021, export revenue from cocoa stands at 3.37 billion. Cocoa butter remained as the major contributor of the total export earnings at 37.2%, followed by cocoa powder, which is 23%, and re-export of dried cocoa beans at 17.3%. The cocoa plantation area in 2021 is 5,955 hectares with the production of 361 tons. Up until 2021, there are actually 53 chocolate companies in Malaysia and 232 chocolate entrepreneurs registered with the Malaysian Cocoa Board. In overall, we can say that the net exports of the chocolate industry contributed 0.49 billion as at June 2021.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Shakira Adina binti Azhari and I will summarize on the cocoa industry's economics in Malaysia. The cocoa industry's boom and bust cycles are the consequence of interactions between natural and economic causes. Malaysian cocoa industry is of growing importance to the world market of cocoa products. In 1980, the industry share in the world exports of each of cocoa butter and cocoa powder was 0.5%. These shares increased to 8 and 5% respectively. In 1990 and in 2010, they increased more to about 15% of the world exports of cocoa butter and about 13% of cocoa powder. However, it saw a fall in its proportion of worldwide cocoa bean exports from around 8.6% in 1990 to roughly 1% to 2010, owing to a large reduction in cocoa bean production and the advantage from the value added generated by producing its downstream goods. Cocoa trees are special in that they require just the proper amount of sun shadow and thrive in diverse biodiversity habitat, which many growers did not fully comprehend during the 1980 boom period. In the early 1990s, we saw a decrease in the price of cocoa. As a result, farmers have abandoned their cocoa plantations in favor of a more profitable crop like oil. The waning world cocoa bean prices, increasing labor costs and loss of productions due to pests and diseases. The declining production of cocoa also due to an increase in the relative competitiveness of competing crops, which mainly is palm oil. These factors contributed to the declining of cocoa supply and production. The three key instruments have been studied: extension, reward, and R&D. However, there are many more in actuality. To supplement these primary instruments, institutional assistance is required. Product development, marketing, promotion, and SME development are all areas that need to be addressed. These aspects will have to be considered in future investigation taken into considerations. The summary on the graphs. In 1986, the price began to decline from 4,260 ringgit per ton to 3,790 ringgit in 1987 and 2,340 ringgit in 1993. Even though the price is declining, the area and production increased. From 1990 to 2000, prices stayed steady at roughly 3,000 per ton. In the 1990s, there was an upward trend in the price of cocoa beans, with an average yearly rise of 6.5%. Before hitting its peak at 8,535 ringgit in 2014, the price began to rise on an upward curve in 2002. Despite the price increase, cocoa bean production and area did not adjust as they ought have. Even though the price of cocoa increased of about 8.2% annually in 2000 and 2014, cocoa area and production of cocoa beans have declined 10% and 17.6% annually respectively. This scenario did not follow the law of supply, as cocoa is known to be rare and precious good. According to the agricultural supply response hypothesis, it is simple to explain the rise in cocoa bean production and area. This explanation, however, does not account for diminishing conduct. This suggests that the cocoa area's abandonment or conversion was caused by other causes other than price.
I am Nurulbaqis binti Muhammad Noor from CS242-2A. Crop diversity in Malaysia has actually decreased with the drastic shrinking of the cocoa industry due to plant management issues that the country's research institutes couldn't solve. There are a lot of challenges that may stymie the growth of the cocoa sector productions in the long run. One of the issues is the insect infestations and diseases. A unique feature of cocoa plant is that it is an agroforestry crop. It requires a shade tree to grow healthily. This means that it could be either planted under the shade tree or in the forest, particularly thin forests. In the early stage of plantation, a large area of forest was cleared up to make way for cocoa plantings. In a bid to improve productivity, it is reported that many farmers have attempted to remove shade. This practice proven right in the short term. However, in the long term, it damages ecosystems by reducing the biodiversity and destructions of the natural habitat on the insects in the area. The destructions of the ecosystem as well as poor farming practices have resulted in an increase of insect attack as well as numerous pests and diseases. The infestations of cocoa pod borer, CPD, was widespread and very damaging to the cocoa beans production. These incidents occurred due to the failure of early detections and poor control of the disease. The second one is limited land. Cocoa used to be a popular crop in Malaysia, but it has changed over the years. From 400,000 hectares in 1990, there were only 11,000 hectares of cocoa farms in 2012. According to Ministry of Plantations, Industries and Commodities, until the year of 2021, the cocoa area has declined to 5,955 hectares, largely due to competition for land use with oil palm and other high-yielding crops. One of the factors that affect cocoa land's conversion into oil palm is the income prospects. Most of oil palm plantations are cultivated and produced by large private plantations. Plantation business owners will definitely tend to increase their business scale and income. Along with the increase of business scale and the increase of income, they will increasingly tend to convert the cocoa plantations lands into oil palm plantations, especially with the support of better market access for oil palm commodities. Thus, due to the insect infestation and the massive breakout of disease, many planters switched to oil palm and rubber that forced them to give up their cocoa trees. Lastly, the most cocoa plantations depends on smallholders. The estate cocoa area has declined significantly from the height of 201,000 hectares in 1989 to a mere 879 hectares in 2021, which is a decline of 99%, while the smallholder area declined from 212 hectare to 5,046 hectare, which a reduction of 92%. The estate showed a rapid decline throughout the period. Besides rapid decline in area and production within the sector, the smallholder has become the predominant subsector. The share of smallholders in the area has increased from 37% in 1980, 51% in 1990, and 95%, which is 15 hectare by 2014, and declined to 5,046 hectare by 2021. In 2014, the share of the estate was only 5% with 827 hectare and 879 hectare by 2021, which is a very significant change in the return of smallholders to be compared with the estate. In short, the smallholder became the major producer in the cocoa beans productions, albeit at a very much lower volume and area. Therefore, based on all the issues stated, which are the insect infestation and diseases, limited land, and also the smallholder dependence, we can conclude that hitherto the productions of cocoa in Malaysia decreases, but the demand is remain constant. The graph shown is a shift of cocoa supply curve while cocoa demand curve is remain unchanged. According to the graph, the cocoa supply curve will shift leftwards and cause the equilibrium price of cocoa to increase from P0 to P1. In addition, the equilibrium quantity of cocoa will decrease from Q1 to Q0, while the new equilibrium level will change from E0 to E1.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Umar Ahnab bin Zaihan. So today I'm going to explain the solution on how to overcome the challenges that cocoa industry face today. One of many solutions on how to overcome these issues is by government intervention. Government intervention is when a government declaring as a rule maker or market regulator must intervene deeply in the transaction disputes between market players, mobilizing public or private resources to resolve the transaction dispute in the process of market governance. The first action that government do in order to increase the production of cocoa is by protecting and restoring the forests that have been degraded by the smallholder cocoa farmer. The purpose of doing this is to slowing down the climate changes so that cocoa will grow efficiently. The second important action that government committing to is accelerating investment in agricultural productivity in sustainable livelihood. Government goal is to grow cocoa on less land, and the way to do that is by boosting the productivity of cocoa farming. The third action that government do is about community engagement. Most of the cocoa farm is a result of poor farmers trying to earn more income by going to the protected area to cut the trees and grow cocoa for themselves and their family. In this, government will focus on community so that they are well treated and respected. So the second solution on how to overcome this issue is by pest management. As we know, a healthy and productive cocoa plantation is one of the sources income for many countries in the world. Unfortunately, we have insects and other pests that can damage the cocoa production and can cause up to 80% of production losses. So, the action that we have to take in the pest management is shade regulation, improving the soil, application of preventive inputs using copper-based product, and biological agent. Also, the last one is disease control. Okay, right now I'm going to explain on how the pest management works. First of all, you should have a good maintenance in pruning. Pruning could be done to increase aeration of the plot and reduce the humidity to limit the spread of fungal diseases. Other than that, you should make drains in the farm so that the excess water in the soil will provide the necessary aeration needed for proper crop root development. Also, you should fertilize the soil, and because it will help the cocoa to have a better resist in disease in their maturation. By doing all this, the cocoa tree will grow efficiently. When young fruits are present, we must remove the diseases fruits every 8 days for at least 2 months. Also, the trees that are not productive or highly attacked by the disease must be replaced with new trees. By doing all this, it can make the percentage of production losses decrease to 20%. Also, the cocoa will have a better yield, which means more chocolate for us.
Hi, I'm Fatina Jiha and I will be talking about the conclusion for today's presentation. So my first point is that the cocoa industry is a volatile market. A volatile market means that the prices are susceptible to changes and are less likely unpredictable. So in other words, the prices of cocoa fluctuates a lot in a very short amount of time. So cocoa's price elasticity for both demand and supply curve are both extremely inelastic, which means that even if the prices of cocoa increase a lot, their demand or supply for cocoa would only decrease in a smaller amount compared to the price increase. So despite the price increase, the supply isn't responding as it should. So according to the law of supply, when the prices increase, the supply should increase as well, but not in this case. Why? Because the prices of cocoa nowadays are still considered very low compared to the boom in 1970s, and local farmers are receiving lesser and lesser returns from their yields, which is causing them to switch to more profitable agricultural sectors such as palm oil. So moving on to my second point, long-term issues caused due to the desire to increase short-term profit. So this is an example which have been explained by Balkis just now, where the farmers decided to remove shade in order to quickly increase their production to gain as many yield as possible. But this unfortunately has led to a long-term problem, which is the infestation of insects on their cocoa pod borer, which is a result from the ecosystem being disrupted. So even if they produced maximum yield rates in the short term, but the consequence is that their crops are now not as profitable, not as productive as before, and therefore has made cocoa a less profitable option. So supporting my second point, actions should be taken more carefully, more research and extensions are needed. So if there has been a good farm monitoring system, early symptoms of insect infestations would have been identified and measures would have been taken more carefully. So, in an attempt to fix this problem, the government have implemented many programs and researches along the years. However, referring to the official website of the Malaysian Cocoa Board, these initiatives have proven out to be unsuccessful, as Malaysian cocoa farmers are still becoming less and less interested in cocoa. So, the big estate cocoa leaders of the past have long left the industry, and we are now only holding on to loyal smallholders who are still persevering with discriminatory cocoa prices. So in my opinion, the end to Malaysia's prolonged decline of cocoa is yet foreseeable. So I end our presentation today with a thank you very much for still being with us until the end.